for this debt, which multiplies the costs upon us perpetually until, of course, we suffer terminal failure. So it can't be just greedy corporations alone, although they compound the issues. Yet they're a downstream consequence of the obfuscation of the currency, which corporations are a result of the obfuscation of the currency because it denies us a sufficient circulation upon which to sustain the industry and commerce that we're capable of. So the next answer is other. It receives 26 votes. We don't know what other would comprise to each people, but something other than these answers has been submitted to be, the explanation. That could be mathematically perfected economy, a denial of mathematically perfected economy, for instance. So we didn't want to put our answer in any of these other, answers. So, we selected other. But 26 people out of 2,835 selected other. The next is the Federal Reserve. It received 5% of the votes, or 148 of 2,835 votes. Now, let's put that into perspective. Of course, the Federal Reserve is culpable because even if we ignorant people had gone on our ostensibly merry way and the Federal Reserve System had never been created, assumably perhaps, we might presume that we would never have suffered the issues we are today. Wrong, 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 wrong. Why? This obfuscation of the currency has existed for thousands of years. It's what put Jesus Christ on the cross, his famous demonstration at the temple of the money changers, an expression which none of us can understand unless we understand what this obfuscation of the currency is. This obfuscation is what is meant by money changer. Now, this obfuscation has existed for thousands of years. And so it existed in colonial America as it has existed across the world. It's existed in Muslim countries. It's existed in Israel. It's existed in Christian countries and even Buddhist countries across the world. Interest. Forbidden philosophically or religiously to every major religion or philosophy of the world which has a chance of preserving prosperity to the people. One of our most vital rights of all. And everywhere in the world, in every way, we have a denial of it. What the Federal Reserve System does effectively is it united the 12 largest banking corporations under one roof, in which they standardized the interest that each of them would charge as creators of the obfuscated currency, which would be loaned to member banks and they're in turn loaned to the people, through which member banks, or peripheral banks as I call them, merely interface with the people and are subject themselves to multiplication of artificial indebtedness or falsified indebtedness, jeopardizing the ability of the people to pay the peripheral banks, which are obligated likewise to continue servicing the debts which they've incurred to the central banking system, the 12 major corporations. So the Federal Reserve System basically promotes some of the banks above all of the others in what yet still precipitates in this universal obfuscation of the currency. The thing is, if we allowed all of the member banks to create the same obfuscation of our currency, we would have the very same problem, with each of them sharing in unearned profits as they would differently, but with the people being denied representation still and suffering this very same multiplication of indebtedness. So in truth, while the Federal Reserve System, as any central banking system of the world, consolidates perhaps certain banks above others, overall it results in the very same obfuscation of the currency under whatever interest rates prevail, multiplying falsified indebtedness to the purported banking system into a terminal sum of falsified indebtedness. So, is the Federal Reserve System not at fault? Well, of course it's at fault, because it perpetrates this obfuscation of our currency, which is a crime against all of us. But individually, is it as distinct from any other possible manifestation of a purported banking system? No. It's just an organization of the obfuscation which prevails in 12 prevailing banks in the United States through further perpetrations which current obfuscation of the currency has prevailed across the world as the purported reserve currency of the world. A totally preposterous idea which has never been even subjected to the assent of an intelligent public, much less could it ever have passed the assent of an intelligent public, because of course no intelligent public would submit to unwarranted exploitation of its very own promissory obligations, which unwarranted exploitation, the means of which are terminal. So it's impossible. It's literally impossible for any intelligent public in history to have ever given its assent to this obfuscation of the currency, which is, of course, why in every case it's imposed upon the subject people. In the 1912 presidential elections here in the United States, the Democrat Party platform explicitly declared that it would not create a central bank, and of course the Republicans had proposed such a thing. They were defeated, the Democrats prevailed, and immediately the Republican authors of the so-called Aldrich Bill were in the Wilson administration reauthoring the Aldrich Bill under a renaming, Federal Reserve Act. Complete lie. It's neither a federal nor a reserve of anything. But so it's banking. It's this obfuscation of the currency explicitly which is at fault here. The Federal Reserve System is a perpetrator of it. But to say that it's just the Federal Reserve System is entirely right, but it is wrong to limit it to just that, because, for instance, our next answer is Democrats in Congress. 315 votes were cast toward this, or 11% of the vote, 5% toward the Federal Reserve. Well, WorldNet Daily is a right-wing rag, and of course you can expect that the right are blaming the problems on the left, but this is totally wrong, because both sides of the aisle, the usurpation of the right and the usurpation of the left, are perpetrators, co-perpetrators of the crime. That is, they won't even respond to this proposition of mathematically perfected economy. Nonetheless, 315 votes were cast by the right against the left, blaming it on Democrats in Congress, and there's only two other answers which received more votes. The next was Barack Obama. He received 20% of the votes, or 27% of the votes, I think. I might be reading these wrong here all the way through. I don't know, is 1% or 0%, one vote. No one in particular was 0%, 2 votes. George W. Bush was 0% or 4 votes. Tea partiers were 0% or 6 votes. Republicans in Congress were 0% or 6 votes. Wall Street was 0% or 7 votes. Not even 1%. Greedy corporations, 0% or 13 votes. Other was 1% or 26 votes. The Federal Reserve was 5% or 148 votes. Democrats in Congress was 11% or 315 votes. Both political parties that together comprise the ruling elite in Washington was 20% or 559 votes. Now we're getting more accurate here. Now we're getting more accurate. Both political parties. Well, of course. Now this is something that I've been saying for 40 years. I've been calling them the parties of betrayal. That is the two major parties that we have in the United States. Many countries have a number of significant political parties, where in the United States we have two only. Of course, we have other parties, but they're insignificant. Now, 20%, this answer received 20% of the vote, or 559 votes. Truth is that both political parties, now we're not limiting that to Congress in this way, but to any presidential campaign, whatever. And let's just think about that. Obama ascended to the presidency, proposing change you can believe in. Did he ever offer a proposition of monetary solution which could have solved our problems? Absolutely not. I have within feet of myself here the very unopened return proposition of mathematically perfected economy, offering to invalidate every contending proposition. Returned to me unopened from the Obama campaign economic policy team. People who know of my work, who returned it without answer. You know, that's such an incredible thing when you think about it. It's stunning that both political parties are indeed so much at fault. You know, and I don't like to distinguish between races at all. Frankly, I identify with the oppressed races to every reasonable extent. I always have, for some reason. Why, I guess I just have a natural understanding that, you know, we're responsible to each other. We're all human beings. You know, no one has rights above anyone else. And yet I only mention this because a person of African American descent, friend of mine, you know, voiced an opinion during the campaigns that he didn't want to see Obama elected. And the reason that he gave was that he was afraid that our first black president would end up being as corrupt as any white president. So you can imagine the rapport that we have with each other, because, you know, which is the case with all my, I hate to say this, even African American friends. I do not like to distinguish people of country or racial origin at all. But in this case, it's important because it relates to, you know, Obama like this. And well, I'll just let that stand for what it will. We have a candidate who proposed change we can believe in, and we never once received a definitive explanation of what that change could be. And of course, it was understood that economics was the most important, you know, issue of the time. In fact, Obama is famously quoted for, you know, denouncing that, you know, the failure to solve the budget crisis, this is when he was a senator, was evidence of a failed leadership. And now, of course, he's presiding over a failure to resolve the budget issues. He's elevated the ceiling. He's accumulated more federal indebtedness than any president before him, and he hasn't even completed his first term. Now, why should we re-elect this person? Well, even myself, after this false pledge of change you can believe in, which is already proven